Hey there, welcome to episode 122 of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is my Mythic Legions collection. Now, if you're not familiar with Mythic Legions, that wouldn't surprise me unless you're like a big toy nerd like myself. Because the Mythic Legions, even though it's been around for quite a few years now, it's a totally original toy property. It's not based on any pre-existing media, so there's no comic book, cartoon, movie to promote this line. So just to give you a quick little bit of background, there's this group of sculptors that are called the Four Horsemen. They have a Four Horsemen Studios, and they started out, these guys met when they were working at McFarlane Toys, designing like Spawn figures and things like that in the 90s. So that's when I would have first encountered them, although I wasn't aware of their name per se. I just knew that McFarlane Toys was producing the coolest looking figures in the late 90s, early 2000s. So these guys met when they were working at McFarlane Toys, then they went off and they started their own studio, and then they were hired out by toy companies for sculpting projects. So when I became kind of really aware of them as individuals was probably, I used to collect a magazine, Toy Fair magazine, which focused all on the new action figures coming out, and they would interview creators and things like that. And it was a big deal when the Four Horsemen started working on a new Masters of the Universe toy line in 2002. And that was when the series got rebooted into kind of an anime look, and all the classic He-Man characters from the 80s had these really awesome redesigns, I thought. Some people might not have liked the anime look, and I guess it didn't really catch on with kids because the line didn't last that long, but I thought the designs by the Four Horsemen were awesome. The figures were really cool. And even though that didn't last very long, the Four Horsemen did come back and do another line of Masters of the Universe figures for Mattel a couple years later with the Masters of the Universe Classics line, which they worked on for about 10 years, and they produced a ton of awesome figures for Masters of the Universe. So besides, those are probably some of the things they're most famous for, but they have worked on various other lines here and there. So anyway, they wanted to do some original projects in-house, and they started off doing a couple of lines which were kind of small, and I think they probably sold well, but they didn't get necessarily a ton of traction. But then they started this line via a Kickstarter in 2015 called Mythic Legions, which is this kind of swords and sorcery type of line. And honestly, that's the kind of, that stuff doesn't necessarily appeal to me in a big way. Like, I like knights and dragons and stuff as much as the next guy, but it's not one of my major interests. Like, I like superheroes, I like Transformers, I like G.I. Joe. When I was a kid, I wasn't super into Dungeons and Dragons. I was never into Lord of the Rings. I never got into any of the RPGs like Magic the Gathering or EverQuest or Warcraft or whatever. None of that stuff really appealed to me, so I'm by no means a expert or a specialist when it comes to this kind of fantasy genre. But I was already a fan of just the Horsemen's work. They do such amazing sculpts that I was intrigued by this new line when they started it. So they put out a Kickstarter in 2015. It did very well, and the first wave of figures were rolled out in 2016, and they have put out a whole bunch of these Mythic Legions figures in the years since. There's too many for me to remember. I just pulled up a wiki page here to kind of remind myself. But so the first wave of Mythic Legions launched in 2016 after the successful Kickstarter campaign. And I'm not going to count all these figures here, but I would say there was about 30 figures available in that initial Kickstarter, which was crazy. And I remember I was there backing the Kickstarter, and initially there was, say, I don't know, it was 10 figures available. But if they reached a certain funding goal, they would unlock it and a new character would be made available. And if they reached even higher than that, a new character would be available. And this thing was just catching on. It was, really generating a lot of heat. And they just kept unlocking new characters and new characters and new characters. And then I would want to add more money to my pledge because I'd want one of those other figures. And so, yeah, it just kept going up. They'd show more figures, people would put in more money, so then they'd have to show more figures, and so on and so on. So, yeah, they ended up with about 30 figures in that first wave. Now, these things are, they're not crazy expensive, but they're kind of expensive. Let's just say each character is about $40 American. Now, I think they're worth that. They're 6-inch figures. They're highly articulated. They're really nice sculpt. They've got a ton of cool accessories. But 30 figures at $40 a pop American plus shipping. Now for me as a Canadian, that $40 figure is like say a $50 figure. Tack on another, let's say $10 shipping. It's probably even more than that. But yeah, so we're talking $60 a pop. So there's no way I'm going to get all 30 figures at $60. So I kind of had to pick and choose my favorites. So, they had all kinds of different factions within their world. So they call the world Mythos, and all these characters inhabit Mythos. And they provide little bios on the back of the cards, kind of like file cards on G.I. Joes in the 80s. So you get a little bit of backstory with the more figures that you buy. So there'd be factions like knights and ogres and dwarfs and skeletons. So I don't know how many people out there can really afford to just get everything. So I think a lot of people probably pick their favorite factions, and that's kind of what I've done. And as I show you my collection in a few minutes, you'll get an idea of the kind of things I prefer. So yeah, there was Wave 1 in 2016. Then they had Wave 1.5, which was 4 standard figures. And I just said they were 6-inch figures. So in that first wave, of those 30 or whatever figures, most of them were 6 inches. But they did have a couple like 4-inch figures for things that are like trolls or goblins. So you had the standard figure and then some of these little guys. So in Wave 1.5, they had 4 more of those figures, but then they had 2 trolls. And the trolls were big 12-inch figures, so that added a new scale to the line. Then they had Wave 1.75, which had a subtitle, The Covenant of Shadows, and that had another 6 or 7 figures in there. Then in 2018, they had their official Wave 2 called The Advent of Decay, and that was their biggest wave yet. That one had about 40 or so figures, and yeah, there's just a ton of stuff there. Then we got to Coliseum, which was another kind of smaller wave of figures, and I believe it was in Coliseum that they might have introduced the another scale of figures, or maybe that came a little bit later. No, I think that's a little while yet. So anyway, so we had Coliseum. Then we had Soul Spiller, which was another small wave of figures. Then there was Wasteland, another small set of figures. And it was... Man, where am I missing it somewhere? Anyway, somewhere along the line here, they added a new scale of figures, which was a 9-inch, kind of like giant figure. So now you had your little goblins, your standard knights, then you had your giants, and then you had your trolls. So all kinds of cool scales. And then they had their most recent wave, which is what I'm going to primarily focus on in this video. So they had this Kickstarter called, and by the way, I'm probably going to pronounce a ton of shit wrong in this video, so don't get mad at me. With no existing media, it's kind of hard to know if you're pronouncing this stuff right. So like this newest wave, I think it's called Arethyr. So this one went up for pre-order back in 2019, and I pre-ordered my favorites from it. There was 8 figures and 2 horses. So this was now another scale that they were introducing. So I ordered 3 figures and 1 horse. You have to pick and choose with these things because it's just too expensive otherwise. So I just got those figures in last week, and so I figured I would do a video to review my figures from the Arethyr wave, but then I figured I'd also take this opportunity to show you my humble little Mythic Legions collection that I've acquired through all those other waves. So besides Arethyr, they've also put up pre-orders for another wave, and again, I'm not sure how this is pronounced. Arethyr, maybe? So Arethyr was up for pre-order at some point during the pandemic. I think I ordered 6 figures from Arethyr, so I'm waiting on those. And currently, there's another small wave, I don't know what the name of it is, that's currently up for pre-order that ends the end of May. And I've got my eye on 2 of the figures in that wave. I haven't pulled the trigger yet, but I probably will in the next couple of days. So that brings you up to speed on all the figures in Mythic Legions. So there's a lot to collect. So even though you might not have heard of this before, maybe this is the first video that you're hearing about Mythic Legions, you are kind of far behind at this point because there are a lot. We're talking like 100 figures or so now that have already been released, and they're hard to find once they sell out because they make these things like to order essentially. That's why they put up these month-long or so pre-order windows. They don't do Kickstarters anymore. They only did that for the first couple of waves. So now they put up a pre-order window that is currently open right now. Once it's closed at the end of May, you can't order these figures anywhere. There might be some other third-party stores like Big Bad Toy Store that are, maybe they made a certain amount of pre-orders and you can still order through them. And usually after the wave finally comes out and they ship it out to people, they have some in stock. They always made themselves, some extras, and they'll have an in-stock sale. But those things are very hard to get a hold of. I've tried to get onto some of their, in-stock sales, and the things are gone like immediately. You try and put something in your cart, gone. So yeah, it's very hard to get some of these figures. I would highly recommend you pre-order them when they first go up to pre-order. Don't think, oh, I'll wait on this and see if it goes down in price or something, because they won't. Some of these things have gone up, in price quite a bit. Some of the ones that I picked up, I didn't have high expectations for, but now they're selling for hundreds of dollars on the secondary market. So yeah, you just never know with these things. So anyway, I've rambled on enough here at the beginning. So why don't we take a look at the figures from the Arethyr wave, and then we'll take a look at my other figures. So let's start off by taking a look at Arathir himself. So the whole wave of figures is named after this one character, and I don't think they've done that before, so that should give you some idea that the Horsemen intended for this guy to be kind of a big deal in the Mythic Legions universe. So this guy is supposed to be some sort of demonic god, I believe. And yeah, you can tell just by looking at him, he's big and he's got a ton of detail. So let's start off, I'll bring him up a little bit closer. And actually, I'm going to start off with a complaint right off the bat. And there it is. This guy has these giant removable wings. And there's a ton of detail in these things. Like you can see all the sculpted tears and the veins. And they're articulated, so you can move them in. So you could fold them in on his back, so they're not all spread out. So they're articulated there. They're also, if we go to the back, you can see how they're jointed here. So they can move in and out. They can also spin around a little bit, move up and down. So there's some nice movement to these wings, and they're very cool, and they really make the character imposing. The problem is I can't get mine to stay in place. They hook up into this little adapter, and this plugs into a hole in his back, but that doesn't seem to stay in deep enough, regardless if I put it facing this way or if I flip it and put it this way. The weight of the wings just kept pulling it out of his back. So then I tried to add a second adapter. All of this comes with the character, by the way. So if you see on his back, right now I've got this other metallic silver thing plugged in there, and I plugged this into that. And they stay there temporarily, but they don't stay there very good. So when I go to display this guy in my cabinet, I can probably push him up against the back, and they might stay in place. But yeah, if you want to play with this guy, I don't know if you're going to have much luck with the wings. I certainly am not having luck, or maybe I'm just doing it wrong. But with all these Mythic Legions, they share a lot of parts. And on the back of them, they always have these two holes in their shoulder blades. So you could plug this guy's wings directly into his shoulder blades, and I suspect they would probably stay in there a lot better. The only problem is if you put the wings in there, then you can't use these Pauldrons, and I only know they're called that from watching some other review videos. Otherwise, I would have just called them shoulder pads. But yeah, these Pauldrons, that every figure comes with some sort of Pauldron to go over their shoulder, but this guy's are next level. Like these big demonic faces with the painted eyes, the crazy horns. Like I would hate to just throw this in a spare parts bin and not use it. So I think these are a must-have to display on your character. So plug those in the back, which means you need to use the adapter for the wings. There's no other way around it. So yeah, for me, I can't get it to work. So anyway, that's my only real complaint, because otherwise this guy is awesome. So the Pauldrons, again, he's got the same thing on each side. The armor on his arms, it's very medieval. I'm sure these parts have all been used before, because there's a lot of new pieces with this guy. The head is new, the Pauldrons are new, this really detailed belt buckle is new. So they're going to reuse whatever other parts they can. So I'm going to guess, I know these boots and these legs are all reused. The torso is definitely reused. I don't have too many knight characters, but I'm sure these arms and these gloves and everything are all reused. But yeah, I don't mind the reuse of parts as long as we do get some really cool signature pieces in each wave. And this guy definitely brings home some cool signature pieces. Now for weapons, I've got him displayed with his rather plain shield, which you can see just fits in his hand like so. Then he's got this really cool sword with lots of nice detail in the handle. And then this fiery flame effect. It's in translucent plastic, and that's actually removable. So that just slides onto the blade. So you can choose to use that or not. Now otherwise, he actually came with 2 of these swords. So matching swords. He's got another shield, so 2 matching shields. And then the other thing you're seeing there is just another type of back adapter. So quite a bit of stuff. Now the head sculpt on this guy is also really cool. So he's got these big devilish ears, and he's actually got those big piercings, or those, what do they call those? Gauges, or whatever in his ears. So that's pretty funky. The horns, big giant horns that match up with the pauldrons pretty nicely. The kind of fiery, I don't know if you call that his hair, or if it's just flames coming off of his head, but that's cast in translucent yellow with some orange. Looks really cool. Now, when they were pre-selling this figure, this is how he was displayed in all the promotional work. I didn't know what he looked like underneath the mask, and I didn't even know if the mask was removable. And I hoped it was, because I thought this guy looked really cool, very intriguing. But I honestly don't necessarily love this helmet. Like, it's cool, but I just wanted it to be removable, and I'm happy to report that it is. So the bottom part is sculpted on, but the mask, he's just got 2 holes on the side of his head. You can pop this thing out of there, and he's got a really crazy face sculpt underneath. Now look at this dude's face. How cool is that? Like, this guy looks nasty. Like, those teeth are pretty gnarly, and there's no lips covering them. He's got these big crazy yellow eyes with seemingly no eyelids, and then this kind of like bat-like nose. Like, he looks kind of skeletal, kind of vampire-ish. Yeah, definitely a unique design. You know, sometimes I'm amazed that they can keep coming up with unique characters and stuff, but yeah, this guy is really cool. So I'm not going to get into all the articulation and stuff of these figures. But since this is the first figure we're talking about, I guess I'll show you quickly. So they've got like ball jointed ankles, so they can rock side to side, forward and backward. They bend at the knees there, so kick forward, backward. The legs, so they can kind of do the splits, kick forward, backward. And I will warn you with these figures, they're sometimes pretty stiff when they arrive, and you might need to take a blow dryer to them or put them in some warm water to loosen up the joints, because you don't want to try and pose them right out of the box. They could break. They swivel at the waist. They move with the shoulders as you would expect. Elbows, good range of movement. Wrist, good range of movement there. Yeah, ball jointed heads. The heads come off, and they all come with these straps. These are removable. You don't have to keep those on them. The pauldrons are removable. You know, all this stuff. They're pretty customizable figures. And yeah, so this guy is really rad. He is definitely the highlight of the wave for me. I wish the wings stayed on him a little bit better. But anyway, that's Arethyr. Now, before we move on to the next guy, I'm going to keep Arethyr handy because he kind of ties into the next one. So you could buy this figure separately if you chose to, but he was also available in a 2-pack with his horse, and I think I'm saying this right, Aethon. Now here's the box for Arathir himself, along with his horse, Aethon. So these figures were available individually, or you could buy them as this box set together. So I opted for the box set, so I get this much larger packaging. On the right-hand side of the box, you get some artwork of Aethon the horse, and then you get a bio of both characters. On the left-hand side of the packaging, you get a picture of the other horse that was available in the Arathir wave that I passed on. On the back of the box, we get that same artwork that we saw on the individual carded figures of Arathir standing here with his flaming sword. but the artwork has been expanded, and we get to see some of these other cool characters lurking in the shadows. I don't really know anything about these guys, but looks pretty cool. And then there's a little bit of a story of mythos in the bottom corner here. So here is his horse Aethon. And this wave, Arathir, was the first time Mythic Legions had included horses, and there was 2 available. The one horse that I didn't get was kind of a standard brown horse like you would expect to see here on Earth. But on Mythos, I decided to go with this horse, this demonic horse that Arathir rides. And he's really big. If you have any of the horses from the Masters of the Universe Classics line, like Swiftwind or Arrow, you kind of know what to expect. He's probably pretty close to the same size. I think this guy's a little bit bulkier, and he has some more like added articulation, probably some added detail. So this guy's got like the flaming effect on his tail, which is posable, and on his hooves, and on his mane. Really cool flame effect there. This guy's face is pretty crazy, from the teeth down the eyes, the horns, the headgear. He's got real metal chains hanging from him. I actually found it kind of funny. I think his saddle and his whole little kit here looks pretty standard. You could probably put that on the other horse, put it on a cowboy, and it wouldn't look out of place. So I think it's kind of funny that this demon from hell or whatever would have such a typical saddle here, but that's really neither here nor there. I'm not knocking it. But yeah, this guy looks great. And I'm kind of limited by the space I've got here, so it's hard for me to show you. But Arethyr should be able to mount him. So there you go. So yeah, you can imagine how imposing this would look in a display case if you had this horse with this dude on top with the full wings spread out. Yeah, pretty crazy looking. So yeah, this guy is really cool. Now let's move on to another figure in the wave. So here is Malephar inside of the packaging. On this side, there's just a little logo to signify which faction he's a member of. And on this side, you get a little bio of the character. On the back, you get a large painting of Arathir, who's like the main character of the line. This particular wave is named after him. Down the left-hand side of the packaging, you'll see all the different figures available in the Aethir wave. And at the very bottom, there's a little bit of a history of the world of Mythic Legions. So this is my first of the like 4-inch size, like the smaller figures. These figures have been around since Wave 1 back in 2016. There have been a lot of little goblins and a lot of little dwarves. But yeah, they haven't really appealed to me. But I thought this guy was kind of neat. In part because one of the big trolls that was released previously, I think it was called a frost troll. He had this like light blue skin, and he had these curved horns that came around his head, and I thought he was really cool. But because he was one of the really large figures, he was just kind of expensive, and at the time, I just couldn't justify shelling out the cash for him. So when this figure came out, it seemed like it was from like the same species. Now, I don't think the kind of bio really backs that up, but he has a design similar to that kind of frost troll or whatever, and that's what kind of appealed to me about this guy. So yeah, great detail in the head. Really creepy little mischievous face. Got the curved horns, kind of that, lots of crazy teeth. Now the armor here, I'm sure this is probably by and large reused from other small figures, but I don't have any of the other ones, so I can't really compare and say for sure. But it looks like pretty standard armor. He's got hooves here, which probably a lot of the other little guys wouldn't have. Now on the back, you see he's got some wings too. Not nearly as impressive as Arathir's wings, but they function the same way. So you see he's got pauldrons in his shoulders as well. So if I choose not to put the pauldrons in, I could plug these wings directly into his shoulders, which would make probably more sense from a, just a biology standpoint. But since most people want to keep the pauldrons in, you can use the adapter here to plug in the little wings, and then they still have movement. So you can move them back and forth like so, and this here moves a little bit up and down. But yeah, and they stay in nice with him. See, I'm holding him by the wing and he's flying around. Whoop. And that works fine. So these wings obviously aren't nearly as heavy as Arathir's. So this is how it's supposed to work, but it's just, yeah, it doesn't work on the other guy. So yeah, like I said, the Pauldrons are removable. With his, they're not nearly as exciting as Arathir's. These are pretty standard. For weapons, he's got this little sword here. You saw I had him holding a pitchfork, which he just dropped, which is a nice little weapon for a little demon guy. He also had this axe, which is pretty cool. The other really cool accessories he came with is this helmet. So if you chose to display this guy as like a little, a little person knight or something, and you didn't want him to be a demon, you could do that as well. And another cool thing is these things on the side, the wings, they pop out. So you can take those off. You could choose to display the helmet just like so. Or, and I'm not even going to try this. Like I said, these figures, sometimes I worry about breaking them. But I wouldn't be surprised if these horns came out. And you could probably put the horns on the helmet. They have a lot of customizable options like that. Or, like I have, if you have other figures in the wave like I do, there's different things you can attach on. Like some of them have antlers and, different spikes. So it's really cool how they're customizable like that. So that's a pretty cool helmet. It's almost a shame to let it go to waste in the spare parts bin. But as I mentioned earlier, this guy's face was the thing that really appealed to me and made me order this guy. So, very cool. The articulation is basically the same, but just in a smaller scale, but otherwise still turns at the ankles, the wrists, the knees, turns at the waist, ball jointed head, all that stuff. For other accessories, he also has kind of the standard stuff. So in this bag here, you see I've got a couple extra attachments for the wings. So there's different ways you can attach those. And then he's got this strap here that goes around his torso. That's the same thing you saw on Arethyr. I had 2 of them on him. Pretty much every Mythic Legions figure comes with one. So if you could pop this guy's head off, and that way you could fit the strap over one of his arms and have it coming across his chest like that. And the one thing I want to mention about this guy is the tail. It came loose in the package, and you had to attach it to him. And I flipped up his little skirt here, and I was like, there's no hole to plug it into. Like, what is supposed to go on with his tail? I was so confused. And I had to watch another guy's video to explain it to me. But this thing here was plugged into his butt. So the hole where I currently have the tail, this little thing was plugged into it. And at first glance, it did not look like it was removable. This, I don't know if you can see this, but this was plugged in there, and it just looked like it was part of the sculpt. It was totally smooth. And I thought, well, they must have screwed up. They didn't put a hole in there for his tail. And I really had to wrestle to get this thing out. You can see the plastic is kind of warped where I really had to yank to get that out of there. It didn't seem like it was supposed to come out. So yeah, if you buy this figure, just be ready to wrestle with his butt for a while so you can get his tail in. But yeah, really cool figure. So yeah, I'm digging Malephar. Here is Hadriana inside of the packaging. We get the logo for her faction on the left-hand side of the package. And on the right-hand side of the packaging, there is a bio of the character. The back of the packaging is the same. It's got that same painting of Arathir, along with the characters down the left-hand side, and the history of Mythos on the bottom. Now, one feature about the Mythic Legion packaging, at least of these single-carded figures, which is pretty cool, is you'll see that the plastic, it just wraps around the card with these little tabs. So you can actually lift the tabs and you can just slide the cardboard backer out like that. That way you can still access the figure. You can open it up and display it. But if you choose to put it back in the card, you can easily do that by sliding this back into place. And you didn't have to destroy the packaging to get the figure out of there. So this here is the 4th and final figure that I ordered from the Arethyr wave. So this is Hadriana. I think I'm pronouncing that right. So this is a knight, and so she's a member of her own faction. So let's take a look at her. And yeah, she's just got a ton of detail. And there have been plenty of knight characters, and I don't usually go for them. I like kind of the monsters better. But every now and again, I feel the need to add something like this to my collection because this just looks great. Like, look at all that detail in the armor. And again, a lot of this we've probably seen before. But just a new coat of paint can really make something look pretty spectacular. And I think she looks great from head to toe with, like, look at all this paint detail. All the little rivets are gold on her silver armor. And she's got all these like leather straps, a different color silver there on the buckles from the rest of her armor. Just a ton of work goes into these things. All the little rivets on her skirt pieces here. The crest on her chest there looks great. Now for accessories, she's got a couple of pauldrons there. Now this one you notice is kind of puffing up. And the reason for that is I've got her capes plugged in underneath. So she's got two capes. One is this soft goods red material, and then the other one is this like fuzzy, like it feels like a stuffed animal. So this big fur cape. And they attach a little awkwardly. They just have a couple holes in them, and then you plug the pegs on the pauldrons through the holes and then plug them to her back. So it does tend to make them maybe stick out a little bit. But so then she's also got the strap, so this is optional. So I've got a strap around her here. And that's how I have this sword attached. So if I move this stuff out of the way, you'll see I've got this sword kind of just clipped into that belt there. The sword comes out of the sheath, like so. So a nice long sword there. Now she's also got this massive hammer. And I'm not sure if this accessory has come with other characters in the past. I think it has, but I don't have them, so it's new to me. It's a pretty cool piece. And my favorite weapon is the like ball and chain, or whatever you call these here. So it's got a real metal chain. You can swing that around. Very cool, very effective. So she pretty much holds on to all of her accessories if you choose to display her like this, with the belt that holds the knife, and you can fit those other two weapons in her hand. So all very cool. The only other items that she has, so in the little baggie for her, I've just got the various back attachments. So like if I did want to plug these into her back, I could attach some wings to her or something if I wanted to, but she doesn't come with any wings, and it doesn't really suit the character, so that's nothing special. But she did come with an alternate head as well. So this is another pretty cool knight's helmet, just kind of a generic knight. So if you bought this character, who's supposed to be a unique character, you could have her with this head, with the lion face, but then if you wanted to buy more of them to build a bit of an army, you could put these heads on them, and these could be her soldiers. So that's pretty cool. Now speaking of her head, so this is a really nice design. So you see she's got this like lion face, this gold lion face carved on the front, and you can see her eyes peering at you through the lion. And you can flip this up and expose her face underneath. So very cool. I like that a lot. Now I will say it does seem a little, from certain angles, it's hard to believe her head would fit in there. Like, I don't know, sometimes you can catch it a little odd, but not really a complaint. I think she looks pretty good. And I'm not sure how I want to display her, with that thing up or with it down, because it looks good both ways. But anyway, there you go. So there's Hadriana. Now, for the sake of time, I'm probably going to fly through the other figures when I show you the rest of my collection. But there is one other character I want to kind of stop and focus on for a minute, and this is Lord Dragool. Now, this figure is actually from one of the All-Star waves, and I forgot to mention that when I was rhyming off all the different figures that you've missed out on. They have done 4 All-Star waves now, and basically what they do is they give fans a chance to vote for figures that have previously sold out for the Four Horsemen to bring back and make another run of that figure. So the All-Star waves are mostly compiled of figures that you may already have, but they usually add 1 or 2 new figures to each All-Stars wave. So this guy here was from one of the All-Star waves, and I forgot to mention when I was talking about all the things that I currently have on pre-order, I have a couple of figures on pre-order from the most recent All-Stars wave as well. So not only am I waiting on figures from All-Stars, but I'm waiting on figures from the, Arethyr wave, and then there's figures currently from, I just want to call it the Army Builder wave. The current wave that I told you runs out at the end of May. I don't think it has any unique characters. I think it's all made up of Army Builders, so I think they might just be calling that Army Builders wave. Anyway, so yeah, I've got like 3 different things that I'm waiting on. So this guy here, this is the only guy I ordered from the All-Star wave. So he was a newly created character added to the All-Stars, made up of, I think, pretty much all existing parts. And I just thought he was really cool. Now, if he looks kind of familiar to you, That's because the Four Horsemen have done quite a few homages to the Masters of the Universe line. So they have a good relationship with Mattel, so Mattel doesn't seem to have a problem with them doing this. So they don't outright try to make a character that looks like a Masters of the Universe character, but they'll take some of their existing parts and they'll paint them up in a way to kind of homage a Masters of the Universe character. So with this guy here, this head already existed. They had previously made some vampire characters. Now, actually, I don't know for certain that this is the same head that has been reused, but they had vampires in this style. They were white skin, pointy ears, the bat-like nose. So this might be a new head for this character, but this look had already been established on some of their other vampires. All this gear, these shoulder pads, this armor, these boots with the big toes, we'd seen all that before on other figures. So they mashed it all together and painted this guy up to look like Hordak from the Masters of the Universe. So bring Hordak out here for a second. So this guy is the leader of the evil horde. He was featured in a lot of the She-Ra Princess of Power cartoons, and he had that very distinct color scheme with the bright blue limbs, the black, the gray, the red bat, and then that stark white face. So I think you can definitely see the similarities here. The fact that they even packaged him with a crossbow, which is an homage to the Horde, because every member of the Horde, including Hordak, they always carried a crossbow with them. Very cool homage. He's got this soft goods cape that is attached to not only his pauldrons, but also to his wrists. So that way, as you pose him, the cape kind of carries with him. It spreads out like that. So that's pretty cool. Also on his axe, he's got this weird little blue head, which seems to be kind of an homage to maybe Imp, the little character that hangs out with Hordak in the She-Ra cartoons. So yeah, just a really cool figure. Like this guy a lot. Let me get rid of Hordak for a second. I just want to talk about his extra accessories. So besides the axe with the removable head, the removable pauldrons, the crossbow, he's also got this really cool shield, which matches his color scheme nicely. He's got the belt that goes around his waist, or around his torso, like everybody else has. I actually don't think he came with any wing adapters, but that's fine. But he does have this alternate helmet. So let's just say you wanted to display this guy as a knight instead of a vampire. You could plop this on him, and it's very cool. And even this little thing on his head, they've got a dragon on there, that pops out. So that's optional. So you can take that out there. If you have accessories from other figures, like maybe a big plume or a horn or something, you could do that. But that's kind of cool. And the little dragon on this head is kind of reminiscent of the evil Horde logo as well, as you see on Hordak's chest. So even if you chose to display him with this head, he still kind of has some ties to Hordak with that bat on his head and the color scheme. So there you go. There's Lord Dragul. And I have ordered from the Arethyr wave. It was comprised of half vampire characters and half kind of forest characters. And I bought all 6 of the vampire characters. So even though Lord Dragul is my first foray into the vampire faction, when the figures from the Arethyr wave show up, he's going to have a nice little squad to hang out with. And I'm looking forward to that. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to fly through the rest of these figures pretty quickly, only spend a minute or two on each one. Because some of these figures are figures I've had for years, whereas all that stuff I just showed you are brand new to me. So these guys here, if it's not immediately obvious, are some of the homages to the Masters of the Universe. So this guy here is named Adamon, which is supposed to be He-Man. Now, he's a little scruffier than the He-Man we're used to, but the name Adamon is clearly a reference to Prince Adam, He-Man's alternate ego. And he's got the shield, the sword, the bare chest with the gray crisscrossed harness. He doesn't look exactly like He-Man, and he's not really supposed to. He's just kind of an homage to He-Man. And this is one of those figures that fetches a pretty price on the secondary market. And I almost didn't buy him when he first came out. Partly because the human characters don't interest me that much. This guy's kind of a pretty standard-looking barbarian. And if they had released this just as is, and his name wasn't Adamon, and nobody kind of mentioned the ties to He-Man, I wouldn't have looked twice at him, to be honest with you. Like, he's a great figure. It's just I have to be a little choosy with these Mythic Legions. But knowing that he was kind of tied to He-Man, and there was a Skeletor homage out at the same time, so I got them both. And yeah, those guys are quite expensive on the secondary market. So after those, then we get some homages to Battle Cat. So in Masters of the Universe, He-Man rides around on a big green tiger with orange stripes named Battle Cat. And his alter ego is Cringer. And Cringer is a coward, if you're familiar with the cartoons. So they named this guy Cowros. So I guess that is the tie to Cringer, the cowardly cat. But this guy looks pretty awesome. It's basically, Battle Cat on two legs. So he's got his tail there. He's got his big crazy boots. The armor is the same color armor that you would see on Battle Cat. In fact, I've got a Battle Cat handy. Let me grab him. So here's Cowros with Battle Cat and Adamon with He-Man. So I think you can see the similarities. These guys' armor matches up pretty much perfectly for color. So yeah, this is a really cool design. Now this guy he's the same size, like he uses the same body as Adamon over there, but you'll notice he looks quite a bit bigger when you stand them next to each other. He seems to have some extra bulk to him, and that's because he has this whole extra piece here where you see this harness. It's not just the harness, it adds this whole extra bulk to his shoulders here, which really gives him some extra height and like an extra thick neck, which is very cool. They've used that on a few other characters, but it looks really good on Cowros. So next up, I've got a couple other homages to the Masters of the Universe. So these characters are known as Celtus and Purplor. So it should be pretty obvious to anybody that these guys are homages to Skeletor and Panther. So for Panther, for example, he's built the exact same way as Cowros. So he's got that extra piece on his back here to kind of give him some height, but it's the same head. He's just painted purple, and he's got this kind of metallic green armor, and it matches up perfectly to Panther figures, especially the one from the Masters of the Universe Classics that the Four Horsemen worked on. And then with Celtus here, so Skeletor always had a big buff muscular body and a skull head. So this guy's got little bony limbs, so it doesn't quite match up with Skeletor in that regard. But color-wise, this is a guy with a skull head. He's blue. He's got purple armor. Definitely ties to Skeletor for sure. Now, let me just grab those characters and we'll do a comparison. So here's Purplor with Panther. And you can see how these color schemes are like perfect. The armor on this guy matches that saddle perfectly. You can, well, with the tail I think causes a problem, so you can't really mount him when he's got the tail on. But sort of. I could force him on there if I wanted to. Now as for Skeletor, so here's a comparison side by side, so you can see they both have the blue skin, with the purple boots, the purple armor, the black loincloth. They're both carrying an axe, so there's a lot of similarities here. Now, I'm not going to bother to bring out all the accessories with these older figures, but what I'm showing you here is definitely not all the accessories these guys come with. Most Mythic Legions tend to come with more stuff than they can carry. So with Celtus here, one of the things he came with is an alternate head that I thought I should dig out and show you. I prefer this head, the blue skull, but he does have this head as well, which has a hood and this little spike on the top. But if you put this head on him, then there's no denying the connection to Skeletor. Once you see that like yellow skull with the green highlights and the red eyes, like it's very obviously Skeletor, almost too much so, I would say. So that's kind of why I chose to display him like this. I still think he's a nice homage as is, but I didn't want him to be so obviously Skeletor, because I don't think Adamon is so obviously He-Man. You kind of, if somebody tells you it, then you see it. But so that's the thing. If somebody comes over and looks at my collection, they wouldn't necessarily think that's Skeletor right off the bat. And I kind of like that. Now, since I showed you that extra head, I thought I might as well bring out some of these other extra heads, which are kind of interesting. So for Purplor, for example, he had an extra head as well. So if you wanted to display him not as a big Panther guy, you could pop his head off, then you could pop this extra kind of furry, because you see this is all hairy, but the rest of his body isn't. It's actually pretty smooth. It's just his, like, this top part here and his tail that are furry. So you could pop his tail off, pop his head off, pop his bulky neck off, and then he comes with this matching purple orc head. So you could have this kind of angry purple orc on this body if you'd rather. So, that's a pretty cool option. And same as with Adamon, the He-Man character. He came with this kind of standard generic knight head, so you could make him a generic knight. And with Battle Cat, Kauros, you could display him with this head. And this would make him kind of an armored orc, because the green skin and the red armored helmet matches up with the armor on his body. So you have that option as well. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, let's move on. So the next two figures I have to show you are Krona and Brother Mandibulus. So Krona here is the last of the Masters of the Universe homages that I have. And this guy, I think, is pretty obviously an homage to Trapjaw. Now, the Horsemen have also done homages to Man-at-Arms and to She-Ra and to Evil Lyn, but I haven't gotten all of them. They're neat, but I don't feel I need to get every single homage character just because I already have a full Masters of the Universe collection, so I'm just kind of getting my favorites. But the skeletons are one of the factions that I've chosen to collect. So when it came to Celtus and to Krona, they both happened to join the skeleton army, so it makes sense that I would want to add them to my collection anyway, regardless of the homage. But you can tell by the colors on this guy that he is definitely Trapjaw homage. Let me just grab him for comparison. Yep, so here is Trapjaw from the Masters of the Universe. So you can see here they both have these black boots that come up, right up to their thighs, and they've got a little bit of a green accent, the purple loincloth, the big green belt with the skull on the buckle, the blue body. Now, Trapjaw always had this big kind of black harness that covered half of his arm or half of his torso because he has this bionic arm on the right side. Now with him, they only gave him one of the Pauldrons, so that kind of looks like that. And you see he's only got one armored arm in all black and the other one's exposed. So that kind of matches up with the metal arm. And then for the jaw, of course, Trapjaw in Masters of the Universe had his jaw ripped off, so he's got this mechanical jaw. And with Krona here, same idea. The skull there is missing the bottom jaw, so he's got this kind of extra purple jaw kind of added to enhance it. And then you can see he's got this little crown piece that you can choose to put on or not, and that kind of matches up with the purple helmet of Trapjaw. So a pretty cool homage character, and it's a really cool character in his own right. I like this guy a lot. Now let's take a look at Brother Mandibulus. So this is another really cool skeleton character with a really crazy intense face under there. And I actually don't know if it probably is removable. I don't think I've ever removed it. But you can see he's got kind of this screaming skull face in there. And then the helmet, one horn broken. He's got these big spiky pauldrons, a really kind of unique design on his tunic here. These big spiky boots, which we've seen a few times on characters already, but I love those boots. They're just very cool. Then he's got some soft goods, half black, half red. Just kind of adds to his he's got this theme of the half black, half red, these two different tones throughout. Again, he's got one armored arm, kind of like Krona there, and then one bony arm. He's got a couple of big crazy weapons, these big swords, big spear. So very cool. I really like the skeleton characters. I don't have all of them, but I do try and get the majority of them. Now this here is the last of my skeleton army so far. And I'm trying to keep all these guys' names straight, but I believe this guy is Tibius, this guy is Malleus, and this is what they just call a skeleton legion builder. Now they had legion builders for a couple of the different factions, so you could get, say, a dwarf or a knight, just legion builder. And these guys were actually at a smaller, or a cheaper, a lower price point, I guess is the word I'm looking for. And it's because they had reused parts and lacking paint detail. So you can see here, like, he's got the same armor as Tibius there, like the chest and the pauldrons. Everything's the exact same, but this is just a flat gray. There's no paint detail on any of his armor. So, the bone and everything still looks nice. Like, there's a nice wash over this. It's still a really, interesting looking figure. But because of the fewer paint apps, they were able to charge, I think it was like $10 less for these guys. And that's usually the case with the Legion builders. They're always a little bit cheaper. So this is cool, and it was intended for, if you did want to build a skeleton army, you could buy a bunch of these guys, and they would just kind of fill in your background. They didn't really have any unique features. Now, as opposed to Tibius here, he's got this like red war paint running down his face, so that kind of makes him stand out. And then you can see with his armor, see how he's got all the rivets painted, different shades of gray and silver in there. He's got like some streaks of dirt or blood on his armor there, which is really cool. He's also got this soft goods cape, which is all torn up. So he's got some unique features. He's got these multiple swords, little blade there. And again, these guys might have more weapons than what I'm showing you. But I have these guys on display with what they can carry, and then I just put all the extra pieces in a bin somewhere. So yes, Tibius is really cool. And then this is my favorite skeleton that I have so far, with Malleus. He's just got this really kind of crazy face with a jaw that opens, which the other guys didn't have. So you saw that on Krona, but Krona came later. So this is the first one to have the skull that you can move. And he's got just all this big, crazy, spiky armor. And then these double giant axes. Just really cool looking. I just love this guy's armor. Very neat. So that's my skeleton army. And it is continuing to grow as I have a couple of skeletons on pre-order. So next up, I've got Gwendolyn Heaven's Brand and Grisha the Slitherer. So both these characters are pretty cool looking. As I mentioned earlier, I don't buy a lot of human characters, but I really liked Gwendolyn when I saw the armor here. It's just a really nice color scheme with that gold and purple with the silver. Just a really nice design. Also, I like that the helmet, you can put that visor up and down. I just thought she looked like a really cool character. And she was my first female knight. And once I kind of start in on something, then that kind of starts a little trend. So the fact that I already had Gwendolyn kind of made me want to buy Hadriana in the most recent wave, because I thought it might be nice to have two female knights to display together. So yeah, just a lot of cool detail in her armor here. And yeah, like this thing here. I don't know what you call these things, but this pops out, so you can remove that if you don't want to display it. I like the way it looks, but I find she's always fallen over in my shelf, and I think that big plumage coming out of the back of her helmet is a big reason for that. She's a little awkward with, this big shield. Then I've got this big sword tucked in her back, and this thing here. So she's kind of hunched when I display her. She's often falling over. Now, she does have the option to display with this unmasked head. So that's kind of cool. But I like the helmet with the visor. Now, this guy here, he's definitely one of my favorites. So Grisha the Slitherer. Very mysterious kind of bio came with this character. It's not really clear what gender this character is, or if it's even a human character. It's very mysterious, but it kind of strikes me as like the Boba Fett, at least of the wave that it was part of. Like, very deadly, very mysterious, kind of a cool helmet. It's super cool. Like, when this character was shown, I was like, yeah, this doesn't look like anything else I've seen before. I'm used to seeing knights and skeletons and ogres. But yeah, to see this character, I just thought, wow, that's a really nifty design. And they make it work. Like, it seems to match this world, even though it doesn't look like any kind of fantasy character I'm familiar with. You can see a number of different blades that he comes with. He's got another sword tucked into the belt there on the back. Soft goods cape. Yeah, just a really cool character. Now, these next two characters... this is Faunus and Azar. And it's hard for me to really describe what appealed to me about these guys. I just really liked the look of them. They don't really match up with any of the other factions I've collected. Like with this guy, he was available in blue as another character, Zazar. And then they did a red female of that design too. And I didn't buy either of those characters. I just really liked this yellow guy. He was included in the very first wave, whereas Faunus was from wave 2. So this guy here, get a closer look at him. He's got this spear here, I've also got a sword stored on his back. I just really like this head design. Like, I don't know if I'd describe it as demonic or alien or what, but it's just kind of a unique character. I don't think this guy necessarily looks, you know, maybe it's because of his bright colors. Like, I don't know if I would describe him as an evil-looking character. He kind of looks like he could be just as easily a good character. And, yeah, I like the kind of the tattoos or markings that carry on from his horns right down to his chest. Yeah, it's just a really cool design. Got these big hooves. Yeah, just really cool. I like this guy a lot. And Faunus is kind of the same thing. Like, I don't know, he's kind of like a forest god or something is what I get from him. Like, he looks like he's part deer and part tree. These little leaves or whatever come up there almost make him look aquatic in some way, like they could be fins. So yeah, I just don't know what's going on with this guy. He's got the same hooves. But yeah, just a really cool armor. I like that metallic green they use there. A nice sword, big shield. He actually had a soft goods cape, but I never was able to figure out how to get it to hang on him properly. But yeah, so just some really coolly designed characters. So these figures here are two of the first 9-inch scale figures. So these were the kind of the in-between between the standard 6-inch figure and then the large 12-inch troll figures. So I was trying to remember at the start of my video where these guys fit in. So it was part of a 2019 wave called the Siege at Bjorngard. And that was just a 5-figure wave, 3 of which were this new scale. So what we've got here, this is a named character. This is Kurzog. And then this here is called an Ogre Legion Builder. So as I mentioned with the Skeleton Legion Builder, you can see these guys have almost the same armor, except his has got all these rivets painted and all these different shades of silver and brown and stuff, whereas the Legion Builder, it's just flat gray and none of this detail is painted. I actually still think it looks pretty awesome, but yeah, this guy here was probably about $10 cheaper because of the limited paint apps. So these guys here, they share a lot of parts. As they make more of these giant figures, I hope we start getting new pieces, because all the giants so far have the same chest harness. So it's starting to get a little old. But because these guys, the paint jobs are so different, I don't think it's immediately recognizable. And they did change some key things. For example, Kurzog has bare feet, where he's got the big spiky boots. And yeah, these are just really cool figures. So if we look at Kurzog up close, lots of nice detail in the face there. I already mentioned all the detail in the armor, that big face on his belt buckle. These wrist guards with the bony protrusions here. He's got bones hanging off of his belt here. The big old bare feet. Now he's got this fur. So this is like real kind of hair on his loincloth here. So yeah, just really cool design. Now for the Legion Builder, I love this helmet. Like the fact that you can't see his eyes through there at all. I find it makes him look very mean and mysterious. But yeah, so he's got a little differences. So he doesn't have the skull on his belt buckle. It's kind of more of just a symbol. He's got the boots instead of the bare feet. Instead of the kind of hair, he's got like fur on his loincloth. So they're different enough, even though they share a lot of the same parts. And also, when you consider these guys are all part of the same army, it would make sense that they would probably have kind of matching uniforms anyway. So yeah, these guys here are really cool. And just before we move on, I'll just bring out one of the standard figures so you can kind of see size-wise how big they are compared to the average figure. So quite a bit taller. Yeah, very cool. Here are a couple more 9-inch scale figures. So this is Balthor the Tower, and so he's like a giant. And then we've got Argamedes, who is a Cyclops. So again, these guys share a lot of the same parts as the ogres we just looked at. This guy's got a similar helmet. You also can't see his eyes through there. He's got these horns on his helmet, which, like we looked at on some of the other figures, these are removable, and you can kind of turn them and display them how you want to, although they're kind of hard to move right now and I don't want to risk breaking them. The harness, the belt buckle, this is all stuff we've seen on some of the other guys. He's got the bones hanging off of his thing there, just like Krona had. He's got the boots, just like the Legion builder ogre had. He's got a different type of fur here, kind of a nice white fur on his loincloth. Big battle axe there. And just like a really cool character. This guy looks pretty tough. And with a name like Balthor the Tower, you can imagine he probably is pretty tough. And then Argamedes, he came out a wave later. So the two ogres and Balthor, they came out in one wave. And then the following wave, they reused that 9-inch body to give us this guy. So, he's obviously a whole different species. He's a different color skin, the one eye. But he obviously goes to the same tailor because, same belt buckle, same harness, same wrist guards, all that stuff. So that's what, I don't mind the same stuff, a few times. But it kind of stands out when every giant character you have is wearing the same outfit. So hopefully we see some changes in that soon. But his head, he's got this removable helmet here. He's got this bald head underneath. It's kind of snaggle teeth. Bit of an underbite. But yeah, very cool looking character. Like the helmet. He's got a little skull of a Cyclops on the front of his helmet. Big socket where the eye is missing. The horns on the helmet. Yeah, just a very cool character. I like these guys a lot. And even though I'm a little tired of seeing the same armor, I've already ordered one of the, like a 9-inch vampire character. I know he's got pretty much the same outfit as well. And I would probably buy it a couple more times before I finally put my foot down. But I'm sure the Horsemen are working on some changes as we speak. Now the last figure I have to show you is the biggest one that I have. This is Brontus. Now this is one of the 12-inch figures that's built on the troll body. Now, Brontus here isn't actually a troll, though, I don't believe. They've made 3 different trolls so far. All of them seem to be kind of different species of troll. They all have different facial structures and all that sort of stuff. But they reuse the body to give us this guy here. And there's something appealing about the Cyclops of this guy. I know I said I'm not super into fantasy stuff, but when I see the Cyclops, there's something about it that kind of reminds me of Clash of the Titans, things like that. He appealed to me more so than the trolls did. So that's what finally made me cave and purchase this figure. And these guys are obviously the priciest of the Mythic Legions figures because they are so much bigger. I can't even fit this guy in frame, but you get an idea of how large he is. Spin around here, lots of detail, all this kind of cracked skin with all these rocky protrusions coming out. He's got the furry loincloth. His weapon is massive. He's got this big club. And he's actually got the skull of one of the trolls on the end of his club. He's articulated. He moves his arms up and down, out and about. Twists at the elbow. And it's kind of hard. It's really hard to show you this guy because he's just so big and my desk isn't big enough. One of my favorite things about this guy is the paint job in the eye there. There's just a lot going on there. It's a pretty intense face. And then he's got this real metal chain, which is cool, but it kind of drags along the ground here, so it's making a lot of noise here as I try and pose this guy. Maybe I'll wrap around his neck a little bit. But you see here, he's got like big metal belt buckle, furry loincloth, big old feet, big old hands. He's a really cool character. And they've made, like I said, a couple variations of this body already. And they're all cool. I'd like to have them all, but not only are they expensive, but I don't know where I'm supposed to find the room to display all these guys, as they are just big, bulky, hunched over figures. They take up a lot of room on a shelf. Now, just to give you an idea of the size, I'll bring in Argamedes here. So this is the 9-inch Cyclops. So I'll just zoom out here for a sec. Oh, that didn't work. But there you go. So he's quite a bit bigger than him. And if I bring out one of the standard 6-inch figures like Adamon here, you can see just how much bigger this guy is as well. So there you go. This guy's just a really cool figure. All of these Mythic Legions are really cool figures. If you haven't picked any up, I highly recommend them. They're really great quality figures. They make great display pieces. Obviously it's going to be very hard to collect them all, but if you can find your favorites in there, and there's definitely going to be something that appeals to you, I would say, make sure to go grab some if you can. Okay, so that was my Mythic Legions collection. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope maybe you learned something, and if you weren't already buying Mythic Legions figures, hopefully this video has get you excited to go order a few. And if you're watching this video just as I posted it, you can go to storehorsemen.com right now, because like I said, they have some figures available till the end of May 2021. But if you're watching this a little bit later and you missed out on that, don't worry, they'll have another wave of figures up for pre-order very soon, I'm sure. So if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button below, maybe subscribe to the channel, and as always, I appreciate any comments that you want to leave me below, so please do that as well. And I will be back soon with another video. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.